Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I first of all would like to thank ECE and the organizer for inviting me to give this keynote at this conference. First of all, I'd like to say a few words about the United Nations Statistics Division, which basically is one of the division at the within the UN, whose responsibility is really working with statistics and with data, and in particular coordination, methodological development, and capacity building in countries. The common thread that has been going through the work of the statistics division in the recent year has been in particular the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the post-2020 agenda, Sustainable Development Agenda. The Statistics Division is the secretariat of the UN Statistical Commission, which is the body which basically adopts statistical standards and sets the global agenda and the program of work in statistics. This meeting took this year in particular. It was particularly exciting for us because the system of environmental economic accounting, ecosystem accounting, was adopted as an international statistical standard, and this happened less than 10 days ago. So, and rarely I have to say that the adoption of any standard has generated so much interest from government, the media, and the I would say the political sphere. So what my talk would focus today is really on the system of environmental economic accounting and why it generated so much interest, and why the need for an accounting approach, and what are the next steps after the adoption of the system of environmental economic accounting. So here, just to start, I'd like to show some of the quotes that were given by, in particular, by the UN and the EU, which were the main proponent of this framework. But I have to say that this has been very much a common exercise with many experts. And I think what should be noted that this will be a document which will be published by many international agencies, including the World Bank, the IMF, the OECD, and of course the UN and the European Union. So what we basically see from these messages, both from the UN Secretary General and the UN Chief Economist, is that a call for really a transformation of seeing nature in a different light, and to basically trying to mainstream it in the decision-making process. And also I'm showing here some of the EU quotes as well. So nature basically is not infinite, and we cannot continue to provide services forever for free. So GDP is not enough. We need to go beyond GDP. Although it is a good measure for economic performance, we need to take a much more holistic approach. So there is a need of, what comes out from these quotes is that there is a need of urgency. Basically the climate change crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and the COVID-19 have really shown that now it's the time to take nature into account and make nature visible. There is an opportunity now, especially in the context of building back better, and there is an opportunity to transform and change the way we are investing into not only produce capital, but also natural capital and social capital. So it is basically in the context of this transformative agenda that this system of environmental economic accounts is being developed. So these are exciting time. The governments now have tools that can make visible the messages and we need to keep the momentum going. So what is the SEEA, and why do we need an accounting approach? So the SEEA is a way of organizing information on the environment and the economy in a consistent and coherent way. It is fully aligned with the system of national accounts, and it basically applies the accounting rules to the environmental information to be able to have it fully integrated within the system of national accounts. It provides international comparability, broad credibility, and replicability. So it's a way of transforming the data, which comes from different sources usually, into information. So what the status quo is and has been is that there are different agencies that have different policies that produce different information, and at times these policies may also be contrasting, as well as the data designed. So what the accounts does is basically organize this information starting from a set of basic data and develop indicators which are coherent and consistent. So the approach is the fundamental, let's say, value added of the accounts is looking at these interlinkages between the economic and the environmental data, which are usually kind of missed when looking at the silo approach. To go a little bit more in detail of what the SEEA is, so we have three documents. The first is the SEEA Central Framework, which was adopted as an international statistical standard in 2012, and takes very much the perspective of the economy and looks at how the economy uses natural resources. And also what are the economic instruments that are within the economy that are used, for example, to measure the environment. So, for example, we are looking at environmental expenditures, we are looking at investments into the environment, and we are looking at environmental taxes and subsidies. And then we have the ecosystem accounts, which was just adopted. And I have to say that the language is quite strong. We have the chapters 1 to 7, which is on the accounting framework, and the physical accounts was adopted as a statistical standard. The chapter 8 to 11, which are on valuation and integration into the accounting framework, which have been adopted as internationally recognized statistical principles and recommendation coherent with the system of national accounts. And chapter 12 to 14, which deal mostly with the thematic accounts and indicators, as well as a link between the valuation used in the accounting framework with the welfare measure as applications and extension. I mean, here there was, maybe if I can just open a parenthesis on the basic discussion that happened during the Statistical Commission, is that we had a group of countries that really wanted the whole SEEA, including valuation, being a standard. And the main argument here being that having the SEEA as a standard would help countries to obtain national and financial resources to be able to compile these accounts, which are really needed for governments to manage the ecosystems and the natural resources. Whether other countries were claiming that the valuation techniques in particular and the interpretation of the valuation was not yet tested enough within an accounting framework. And so there was this tension between, in particular, I would say, the developing countries and the more developed countries that wanted to recognize that valuation needed further work. So that's why we kind of separated the chapter 8 to 11 from 1 to 7 to identify that chapter 8 to 11 there is a kind of an agreed framework to it, but still it's not at the same level as the physical accounts. But I mean, I think at the end, the compromise that was reached is basically saying that now we do have a common framework, and where the implementation can start, and we all should kind of focus on using this framework to move forward into the implementation. And the third volume on application and extension is mostly linked to the central framework, and it presents more the indicators that can come back related to the for example, natural resource efficiency and linked to the SDGs, as well as input-output type of analysis. So what we have now is that we have the system of national accounts, which is basically the standard which is being used for deriving economic information, and the system of environmental economic accounts, which now it consists of the central framework and of the ecosystem accounts, which are basically at the same level. So the way we conceptualize, let's say, the relationship between the SNA and the SEEA is that the SNA deals more with an accounting framework for the economy, and the SEEA deals with a framework for the environment, an accounting framework for the environment. And these two frameworks are fully coherent with each other. So there is a full integration between the system of national accounts and the system of environmental economic accounts. And then we have what we call subsystems, which go a little bit more in depth and try to link the different themes with the accounts. So, for example, in the case of the SEA water, we are dealing on finding kind of common language with the hydrological world, and trying to apply an accounting approach to measuring water in particular. And we have one for energy, one for agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. And then in the pipeline, there are a number of other publications that we are working on, and it's measuring sustainable tourism and measuring the ocean accounts and biodiversity accounts. And at the same time, we are also working on guidelines which will provide practical examples on how to compile these accounts. So what the SEEA central framework and the SEEA ecosystem accounts do is basically measuring the environment from two different lenses. The SEEA central framework takes very much the lenses of the economy and looks at how the economy uses the environment in terms of use of natural resources and extraction of natural resources used within the economy, and then generation of residuals. So in this case, we are looking at emissions, let's say, into air, water, or generation of waste, extraction of timber, water, mineral and energy resources. And we are also looking at all the flows within the economy, which means investments and environmental taxes and subsidies and economic instruments related to the environment. What we do with the ecosystem accounts is instead looking at the environment from the perspective of the ecosystem, and looking at the ecosystems in an integrated way. So we are looking at a very much a spatially explicit approach, and we are looking at the integration of the different assets which are within the ecosystem. So the ecosystem is actually spatial areas where we have individual components similar than what we had in the central framework. We have timber, we have water, we have soil, and so on. But we measure it in an integrated way, and we look at the, so if we go explain a little bit more what is the SEEA ecosystem accounts, So what we do is we have a set of accounts that measure the extent and the condition of the ecosystems, and that are part, let's say, of the stock accounts. So what we call is really the asset, the wealth. And then we measure, on the basis of the extent and condition, we measure the ecosystem services that are generated in physical terms and also in monetary terms. So then looking at the ecosystem services, we also then generate the monetary asset accounts, and we look at the changes which can be caused by degradation or enhancement of the ecosystems. So this is a little bit the type of accounts that we measure within the ecosystem accounts. So the basic model is that we are, I mean, the environment, the economy sits within the environment, as well as the society sits within the environment. And we have a set of ecosystem assets for which we measure the condition and the extent. And we measure the ecosystem services which are provided to the economy, which generate benefit and also have an impact on well-being. In addition to that, we also look at the different flows that are generated within the economy and have an impact on the environment. So, for example, the environmental expenditures, environmental taxes, environmental investments, and so on. So this is kind of the general model, is really looking at all the flows that generate, that link the economy and the environment. So, if just to explain briefly what the SEEA ecosystem accounts is, I mean, if we look at an ecosystem, we are looking at it not only in terms of the individual assets, let's say the timber which sits on a forest, but we also look at the condition of the ecosystem in terms of a set of variables. So that could be, for example, soil depth, or could be vegetation, and could be different sets of indicators depending on the ecosystem type. And on the basis of the extent and of the condition of the ecosystem then generates services. And these services include, of course, the provisioning services, so timber, but also water filtration or air filtration, carbon sequestration, carbon storage. And they provide benefits, which include, for example, clean water and to beneficiaries, so to the people. So the way we actually do this is through it's very much through spatial representation of things. So we look at vegetation, for example, maps of vegetation, water, and soil, that then, and from that we generate the ecosystems and ecosystem extents, which can be represented both in terms of maps and in terms of tables. And so what we look at is basically at the changes of extent and over time, to see basically whether the ecosystem has changed. And we also look at condition, and we look at the services that are generated, and we overlay these maps also with, for example, with the population, to also identify where the beneficiaries are. Or we can also overlay with the different type of layers, including, for example, businesses and so on. So this actually, the nice thing about the ecosystem accounts is actually is spatially explicit and providing information on the context where, for example, businesses operate. So I mentioned that in addition to the extent and condition, we also look at the monetary accounts, and we look at supply and use tables for ecosystem services and how they actually are integrated into the system of national accounts. I mentioned before that valuation is one of the areas which is most controversial. There are many values prospective, and it is of course difficult to put the value onto something that is not really exchanged in the market. One thing I would like to highlight that the valuation that we have chosen is coherent with the system of national accounts, so that it allows to actually integrate this information with the standard national accounts. So basically, we can actually measure what is the contribution of nature to production, and what are also, if we look at it from the asset side, what is the degradation that is generated from the degradation of the ecosystems. So the basic valuation method that we have chosen is based on exchange values, which basically means that we are excluding the consumer surplus, and we are valuing the ecosystem services only in terms of equivalent to what would be their value in the market. Of course, this is a partial valuation, so it's not holistic, it's not complete, but at least the idea is that we put some kind of value on nature. There are, of course, many challenges on this. There are issues of data qualities. There is uncertainty linked also on future price if we want to value the assets using the net present value. There is an issue also of interpretation of the valuation and an agreement on the methods, so that basically the evaluation of the various ecosystem services becomes consistent and coherent over time. But nevertheless, it's quite important step to start valuing this, the ecosystem services and the ecosystem assets in order to better understand their contribution to consumption and production and to well-being. So now that we have a common framework, so what next? So the next steps are of course, related to the implementation. So we need to work in implementing this framework in the countries, considering the high demand that we have. We have carried out a global assessment in 2020, and basically we have about 89 countries compiling the accounts. The blue basically represents the number of countries that have implemented the accounts, starting from having, let's say, a pilot or to a full implementation and regular compilation of the accounts. I think that many more, especially those marked in green that are planning to, are increasingly starting to implement the accounts. And this is both linked to the central framework and the ecosystem accounts. We have about 35 countries now implementing the ecosystem accounts on a regular basis. So if we look at from 2006 to 2020, we have almost the number of countries moved from 49 to 89, and I would say that the increase has mostly covered the developing countries that have started to regularly compile these accounts. What next, in addition to the implementation and developing tools to allow countries to do the implementation, is also to engage with ongoing initiatives. And in particular, in 2021, which is the super year for nature, was supposed to be 2020 and now it's 2021, We are working very closely with the Convention on Biodiversity and in particular on the monitoring framework in support of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is expected to be adopted in 2021 in Kunming. So the idea is that the indicators, especially both the headline indicators, but also the supporting indicators, will be generated using the SEEA accounts. And of course, all the climate change and the sustainable development goals are also very important vehicles, let's say, to promote the use of the SEEA to support integrated policies. One also area of work which is quite important and is getting quite a bit of traction is the alignment of the SEEA ecosystem accounts and business reporting. There is quite a bit of interest in establishing this macro-micro link, so bringing together both the national statistical offices and the businesses. And this is for two reasons. One is because the national statistical offices clearly they obtain data from they collect data from businesses, and therefore it is important that the businesses have information which is actually harmonized with what national statistical offices need. On the other side, also national statistical offices collect a lot of information which would be useful to for the businesses, and in particular in getting information on the context of where the businesses operate. So the private sector often does not have ready access to robust data, and here the national statistical offices can help. I would say that the dialogue between public, micro-macro, and public and private sector has until now not really been as strong, especially in the area of the environment, and it is something that we would like very much to continue to facilitate. And the objective here is moving towards the alignment of the SEEA ecosystem accounts with the business reporting. So we are kind of following the steps of the system of national accounts, where we had the system of national accounts working together with the IFRS and the GAP to basically develop a business reporting standard for structural business statistics. At the same time, what we would like to achieve is a similar approach for the in the space of ecosystem and more broadly on environmental accounting. There are a number of initiatives here that and many more that are actually starting to look at the corporate sustainability reporting or developing indicators. So the idea is to really start to work towards aligning the business reporting and the business accounting with the macro accounts. So just a few considerations before I just finish my talk. I think that these are really exciting time at this moment. There is governments now have a tool to actually mainstream nature and make nature visible into their policies. We need to keep the momentum going. The 2021 is particularly important as the year, the super year for nature. The businesses are very much gearing up to to also mainstreaming natural capital within their reporting and the management and their management. The COVID-19 also from COVID-19 is calling for building back better. So not only focus on the economy, but take a much more holistic approach, a much more sustainable recovery. But and the issue is, can the accountants actually support this work? The verdict is out there. Now the tool is there. It needs to be implemented. It needs to be mainstreamed, and it needs to be basically used in policy and decision making. So I would like to thank once again for the opportunity to give the presentation, and thank you.